So good to be with you.
Stream live. Yeah. Good evening, Zach, all the way up in Dubai. I'm glad you're still on the African continent. Sorry we couldn't be in person, swapping and syncing our microbiomes.
On this one.
So thank you for your time to have this really important conversation on salt, soil, and frequency. So we are walking oceans. Our bodies are not 70% water, but actually 70% saline solution, salt solution. So I think the first thing to actually establish when we're talking about salt is that we're talking about mineral-rich, unprocessed, unrefined, unadulterated, whereas table salt, so when we speak about table salt specifically, it is that product that looks like salt, it tastes like salt, but actually it's been so processed that it has been stripped of all of its minerals, it's potentially been bleached, it's been heated to, very high degrees, and it even has dextrose, sugar in it, in order to mask the anti-caking and the free flow chemicals. So what can you tell us about the effects on our health of consuming too much table salt in all of our processed and store-bought foods?
Table salt is a little bit like the equivalent of a monocrop in our farm fields globally. And so when we try to do one thing at scale and try to repeat one concept or one product globally, we end up doing great harm to systems that are complex and interrelated through a system of communication ultimately. And the salts of the world are really fundamental in the way in which electricity travels through organisms. And so without the salt in the system, you lose the organic capacity to move energy and information from place to place within organic systems, whether that be a farm field or a human body. And so when we start to think about the current advent of the last century of really kind of globally commercialized table salt, which is uniformly sodium chloride, that, like you said, carries a lot of processing in its mix, we end up with a deficiency in electrical potential across the body. And we also end up with, a propensity for water to end up in the wrong compartment. For water to get inside of a human cell, you've actually has to have a large electrical charge across the cell membrane. The cell membrane has a number of pumps that move sodium and potassium across the membrane. With an excess of sodium, you start to slow down the exchange of sodium and potassium, and you can actually get vascular and kidney stress from the excess of sodium and a deficiency in potassium and other salts, not in the bloodstream only, but actually inside the cell when you start to lack the ability to exchange the nutrients across the cell membrane. So in other words, as you start to create a monoculture in the salt side, you disrupt the electrical exchange and the movement of water into the correct compartments. The consequence of that is often high blood pressure and also the downstream consequences of not enough electrical energy inside the cell, which can result in everything from insulin resistance and diabetes all the way to deficiency in endocrine function as far as hormone production at the thyroid or the ovary or the testes. So we end up with these deep endocrine disruptions from monoculture salt. That's, again, keeping water in the wrong place, electrical charge in the inadequate in other places, and ultimately that undermining the ability for the cells to communicate through these complex systems of the hormones and the other systems of communication that we would call redox chemistry. So ultimately we're losing communication, losing the exchange of water and electricity across compartments. And for that, we end up with a very vulnerable immune system, vulnerable endocrine system, vulnerable neurologic system, and a lot of dysfunction that we would call the chronic disease epidemic today.
Yeah, because I think it's not known so much that salt is a conductor, and we are these electromagnetic beings, and salt does work as a bioelectrical conductor in the body, and the salt that we require for that is filled with minerals and the micro trace elements. So, yeah, we have the sodium chloride, but we have those very micro. And can you just share with us, how those work and how important those are in this beautiful alchemical process with the sodium chloride and the minerals and the trace elements?
Yeah, when you overwhelm the body with a single element like sodium, or in some ways chloride as well, chloride being the negative charge salt, you lose the balance of salts across the system. And so in our brain, we've been so brainwashed that that salt equals sodium chloride that we've come to forget that it actually means a positive charge element combined with a negative charge element. And those positive and negative charges have a lot of heterogeneity in a healthy system, or a lot of variety. And that variety can be things like, on the negative charge side, things like your phosphates. So something like magnesium phosphate is an example. At magnesium high positive charge, your phosphates can carry a negative charge. And so you get that magnesium chloride is an example of another salt with a positive and negative charge. Pretty much every mineral that you can think of that's required for enzyme function in the body and other things is going to tie back to one of those positive charged molecules, from the typical of sodium or potassium and magnesium all the way to the trace elements of magnesium, or of gold, platinum elements, what's famously now called Ormus, which is the whole platinum group on the periodic chart. These positive charge elements end up being the center point of every enzyme that's produced. Enzymes are the most complex thing that the body produces. They are complex quaternary structures, meaning they have both tertiary structure and three-dimensional structure now, but also have function. They actually turn into machines that can actually do things in the body. They can chew up oxidants. They can chew up toxins within the body. They can clear redox stress. So all kinds of function within those enzymes. For a string of amino acids to turn into a complex protein that will have all that structure and function of an enzyme, you have to have one atom of the element sitting inside of there. So the positive charge elements are functionally the center point of the machinery of the body. The negative charge elements are largely there to reduce stress in the body. And so if you were to boil down physiology or biology to a simple equation, negative charge excess is good for the body, positive charge excess is bad for the body. And so chronic inflammation is an example of an accumulation of positive charge. High amounts of youth within the cell systems, whether it be at the mitochondrial level all the way down to the human cellular level. At any of those points, you're generating a large negative charge. A large negative charge is the equivalent of electricity. So you're putting electrical energy into the second system. Electricity is just one of the three axes of the electromagnetic field. You might remember, if you pulse electricity through a wire, wrap it around a nail, the right-hand screw rule was that if you wrap that thing around a nail rightward, your north pole is up. And so you'll orient the electromagnetic field in a 90-degree angle to one another by flowing electricity through a wire. Nothing's two-dimensional in nature, so there's a third dimension on that. And the third dimension on the electromagnetic field is called the scalar wave. And the scalar wave is what communicates between the physics realm outside of biology and water, and ultimately biologic form. So how a fetus, will create itself inside a womb with that three-dimensional map, or how you continue to repair yourself to the three-dimensional map within your own body, has to do with your scalar connection to the electromagnetic field that is generated outside of the body in the physics realm, where you have these toroidal fields organize a planet or a human body or a flower. All of these things rely on this interchange between the electromagnetic field and biology, and the electromagnetic and scalar waves are the ones that make all of that function happen. As you get mineral deficient, you lose the electromagnetic field and its connection to source, and you then lose the electrical charge flowing through tissue that then neutralizes inflammation, and the rest you end up with chronic disease and dysfunction. And so in a beautiful way, salt and all of these complex minerals are functioning as the center point of the machinery and the flow of energy through the system, as well as this incredible connection back to the original map of biology, which is in the physics realm, so biophysical communication.
complex, and yet salt is such the smallest ingredient in any meal. And I mean, it's so interesting to hear how absolutely vital it is for that whole process to happen. So we can actually put a pinch of salt into our water and turn it into an electrolyte for cellular hydration, and that acts as an electrolyte in order for that whole communication to happen, right?
Yeah, electrolyte is a term that's thrown around a lot these days in the kind of the marketing realm, with a lot of electrolyte solutions on there. But that's basically a marketing term in some ways for a salt. And so because sodium chloride took over the terminology, we needed something else to define complex systems of mineral salts, and that's therefore the word electrolyte. And electrolyte is an interesting term that it does describe this movement of electricity through things, and also describes the charge quality that's happening there with that concept of the light. So I'm excited for the industry to start to really kind of mature to the point where we can really think about salt as a complex relationship between positive and negative charge more globally or more universally, rather than it means sodium chloride or table salt. To that end, we can start to really kind of imagine something like the difference between a probiotic, which is 3 species of bacteria that actually undermine biodiversity in the gut, versus something like a healthy diet that promotes complex interactions to occur throughout the biome. You can actually attract tens of thousands of species back to the gut with a healthy diet, rich in fibers, rich in fermented foods, rich in connectivity to soil systems and the like, versus trying to micromanage a complex microbiome with 3 species of bacteria. In the same way, we need to start to think about salts and table salts and the rest as an opportunity to go beyond the sodium chloride and really think about what did nature intend here. And nature ultimately intended your body to be in constant contact with complex systems of minerals, positive and negative charged salts. And that would have happened through your bathing. For example, you would have been out in a river, or you would have been out in the ocean on a daily basis, just in Africa, and spent time in Costa Rica a few weeks ago. In both locations, you see people every single day immersed in these bodies of water. And everybody feels better at the end of a week or two in any of these locations. The freshwater systems carry a really unique, mineral content, and the ocean obviously has incredibly diverse content there. And so both land and ocean offer different mineral salt complexes. And so the Himalayan salts are famous there for delivering a land-based salt, a pink salts you're used to seeing on the shelves, versus the gray sea salts, or the Celtic sea salt being an example of a brand, or there's lots of different versions of gray sea salts on the market now. And then there's the unique structure of what you've tapped into there, which is under your brand of Oryx salt. And I would love for you to kind of describe the contrast there. But the function is, or the point, what we can point to here is nature intended many different forms of mineral salts to be in direct contact with the human experience, no matter which ecosystem we were in, no matter which environment we had access to. Nature was going to deliver minerals because it was a most critical function of biology, a critical foundation piece of biology as it stands.
Absolutely. So a chef that I work with has got 233 salts in his collection currently, and salt is available on every continent. I think there's only one country, it's Belgium, and I mean that's a small little landlocked country, but salt is prevalent everywhere because it, in fact, I love Khalil Gibran's comment. There's something sacred about salt. It's in our tears, and it's in the ocean, and it speaks to that, that we come from nature. We are part of that nature. Yeah. So just in terms of how, we're all unique and we have different exercise regimes. In your opinion, how much salt is the right amount of salt in order for us to keep ourselves balanced and energized and optimal and vital? How much do you think we should be consuming on a daily basis? From some research, and Dr. De Nicolantonio, who's a cardiac researcher, And because salt has been so vilified and demonized, and I think it's been salt is bad for you, but that was almost speaking to table salt. So yes, at some point, hopefully table salt won't be available on supermarket shelves because it was actually made for industry. It's used in paint and plastic and textiles. So it literally is industrial salt and not really a food grade. But if we're eating a whole food diet and we're cooking mostly at home, how much salt do you think is the right amount for each of us?
I would say that's pretty variable. Actually, it depends a lot on the climate you're in. I just swung climates. I was, a couple of days ago in the early mornings doing deep drives into the bush in the high country of Africa, and so we had temperatures, at 10 degrees Celsius, and now I'm in Dubai at 40 degrees Celsius. And so just in those couple of days, my mineral content and requirements are going to change quite a bit because the amount of salt I'm discharging from my body is going to be highly variable depending on the amount I'm sweating, the amount I'm breathing, the amount of urine discharge I have. So that your hydration, the ambient temperatures, all these things are highly variable. And this is one of my frustrations with not only Western medicine, but our nutrition system at large, is we keep being so prescriptive, as if there was a certain number of milligrams that somebody should be seeing every day of complex salt. Unfortunately, that's just not a sound science. I think that where we need to go to is re-empowering humans to have intuition. And our bodies are extremely intuitive ultimately, and especially when it comes to our health from moment to moment. And so if you really lean into the possibility that your body is actually 70 trillion human cells, all interconnected, running on electromagnetic frequencies that require about 10,000 times more energy than the sun produces, you can start to appreciate that these supercomputers that are processing everything in our bodies know exactly what's needed. And for that, you want to sense into your own body. If you find yourself retaining water, you're not urinating as much, you're feeling puffy, you're bloating after meals, that's a good sign you're probably getting a little bit too much salt for your environment. And so that's a good opportunity for you to reduce the amount of salt. If you find yourself having a really hard time hydrating, where you're peeing constantly, you can't seem to hold on to the water that you need. The more water you drink, the more you pee. Your pee is always clear. You can't concentrate your urine well. That's an indication of mineral deficiency there. If you have indications of chronic inflammation, you're probably either overloaded with sodium chloride or simultaneously, most likely, both, but simultaneously deficient in more complex minerals, needing more potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, and the selenium and the rest. So for that, I'd say the body needs to become your best laboratory, because nobody can be able to tell you exactly how much salt you need. The kidneys are one of the most extraordinary organs in the body, and their whole mission is to keep salt balance in the body. And so they're constantly busy moving salt from one compartment to the other. It works mostly to retain all of your minerals. You try not to pee out most of your critical minerals for the reason that they're so critical to biology. And so your kidneys are constantly preserving. If you get too much salt in a meal or something like that, your kidneys are very good at discharging as well. So it's only under really chronic conditions of mineral deficiency and sodium overload that we start to see the consequences, where the body can no longer function within its adaptive natural systems of kidney and the rest. So I try to help everybody in my clinic and beyond really stop stressing about what food you should eat and how much you should eat of something, and start really learning how to sense your body, how to read this complex landscape and ecosystem of a human body, and read all of the neurologic feedback loops, endocrine feedback loops, all the systems engineering and information streams that are available to you at all times as a human body. And so a lot of this is going to be you starting to really become intuitive about it. There's some really advanced science around muscle testing if you want to get exacting. If you're stressed out that you're not exactly sure if you need more mineral, less sodium, what do you need, you can always muscle test for these things. So applied kinesiology is the science of muscle testing. It's been used in a whole host of different practices and techniques and therapies, etc. But it's a pretty quick thing that you can learn on your own. And so quick muscle testing thing can be like the strength of the muscles with a simple yes/no question. Do I need more salt? Do I not need more salt? A no is a break. A yes is a strong finger. So there's lots of ways to develop, a deep intuitive sense within your body. Let your body answer those questions for you. Is there in the applied kinesiology? So I've seen that work. But in a deeper way, I think everybody needs to understand that everybody's body is really unique unto itself and has, a number of predictable constitutional inputs. And in my clinic, we ended up moving away from like everybody should be on a vegan diet or avoid meat or whatever it is, avoid dairy, avoid gluten. There's all of this avoidance tactics in nutrition science these days, which ends up undermining our connection to nature, undermines our biodiversity of the gut, all kinds of detrimental things. And so one of the key features that we tapped into was this Ayurvedic science. And so Ayurveda has been around for some 9,000 years, and it's easy to take your own test online. You can just answer an Ayurvedic questionnaire, and it'll tell you the three doshas, these three constitutional elements of human biology. And depending on what your balance between those three are, it can again radically affect the amount of mineral or sodium chloride or whatnot that you can or cannot have. And so keeping an eye on that Ayurvedic profile of your own, and then starting to sense in your own body what's too much, what's too little, it would be my observed path. The one thing I can be absolutely sure of is everybody needs all 64 minerals every day. There's not a good reserve of minerals in the body. There's not an organ that just consolidates mineral density for you. You really do need daily exposure to complex mineral salts on a daily basis. And so while I can't tell you exactly how much, I can tell you you're going to need some. And so I think as you start to shift away from sodium chloride in the home and really start to moving to more complex mineral salts, I think you're going to be able to see the difference in your health quite quickly. And I think you're going to be able to get better and better at understanding the relationships between your constitution from an Ayurvedic perspective or otherwise, your environmental factors, the heat, the sweat, the breath, the amount of exercise you're doing today, all of these things affecting you, and even things like the amount of sleep, the amount of sex activity, all these things are going to interplay with that. So it's an exciting thing to realize your body is an intelligent machine in touch with and the result of a complex landscape or ecosystem of interplaying systems. And you have a supercomputer lying within you that can tell you where things lie today. And so learning how to read that text message from the body every day will get you closer to that vital health.
Absolutely. And I guess it's the reason we have taste buds that function. And, if we're craving salt, to listen to that too. I guess obviously ensuring we are hydrated and not having that eating response initially, but to listen to that and to get in touch with our bodies. The one fact I find quite fascinating is with pregnant women is that apparently their taste buds minimize with salt because their blood volume increases by 30 to 40%, and for that they need salt. And so the body is this miracle, and so it dumbs down the taste buds for salt in order for them to consume more, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's incredibly intelligent and adaptive system. So taste buds on the front end, microbiome always adapting as well. And the more mineral content, the more complexity of your minerals, the better it is for the microbiome as well. We've been focused on talking about the human biology, but the bacteria and the microbiome in your gut are going to respond similarly. So the better diversity you've got going in your mineral salts, the better diversity you're going to have going in the gut lining. And that's critical not only for the number of bacteria, but also the way in which those bacteria communicate, which is through pulsations of electrical energy. And so potassium salts, for example, have been shown to be very critical in the interplay of communication from one little sector of the microbiome to a couple millimeters away or even a couple centimeters away. This, when you're a cell that's, a fraction of the width of a human hair, that millimeter or centimeter is a vast distance to travel information across. And it uses salts to get that information traversed across those soil systems of the gut. Same thing in a farm field. If you get mineral deficiency in a cow or in the soil itself, you see a decrement in the health of the crop or the animal. And this is typically notable for invasive infections. On a farm field, that looks like invasive weeds and pests and insect presence. In the animal, it's pneumonia and other inflammatory issues going in the respiratory tree and beyond. In that cow, give them back minerals, both the soil and the cow recover quite quickly. And instead of trying to kill the herbicides, pests, or instead of with herbicides and pesticides, the weeds or the insects, the plant itself starts to express communication back to that larger system, and the weeds and the bugs simply back off, realizing, okay, the system's at its optimal health, no need to intervene. Same thing with bacterial infections or chronic viral infections in a human being. If you can correct the underlying imbalances, those organism deficiencies or imbalances will correct the perception of an infection. Or some sort of invasive, action on the biome. So, by and large, mineral salt is going to give you this higher level of vitality that reduces the symptoms of invasiveness of the nature around you and helps you become more a part of rather than against that nature within you and around you.
Mm. And so I guess it's also just really having intention about the source of our product, where they come from. We know that, and you've spoken so much about how soils are depleted from the fertilizers and pesticides, which translates into our food, and drinking tap water, obviously that's also been sort of adulterated. So just really becoming more mindful. And I think COVID was so incredible for the explosion and growth of farmers markets, and getting back to that farm to fork and being more in touch with food that is closer in our own sort of microbiome climate and communities, in order to get that full spectrum of minerals to support.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and so that really started a few times over history. We've killed our topsoils multiple times over the rise and fall of empires historically. The Roman Empire collapsed with the collapse of farm fields in Africa and beyond, and that was largely done by salting the fields, ironically. And so when you put too much mono salt onto the fields, you'll kill the soil systems, the microbiome, etc. And now we're doing that again today by pouring herbicides. The most common salt that we pour onto our crops is called glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup and about 90% of the other herbicides on the market. We're currently using 4 billion pounds a year of glyphosate into our global soils. And we know that monosalt like that kills soil microbiome and sterilises. And yet we continue to do it. And so we're in this insanity state of soil deprivation on the earth, which is driving this big extinction event. The collapse of the carbon cycle has gotten so much focus on the CO2 in the atmosphere, but that's simply the symptom of a failure of the lungs of the planet, which is not trees, it's soil. So when we destroyed 97% of the farmable soils in the world as we have today, 97% of our soils are deficient in carbon cycling and metabolic life force. We can't move carbon from atmosphere back into the soil and plant life. And for that, we end up with a little extra CO2 in the atmosphere. But the bigger problem is we've undermined life force on the surface of the planet by these vicious salts of the glyphosates. So we need to move away from these toxic usages of monosalts in the chemical ag space, start to understand mineral deficiency as a major consequence to these potent chelators. So not only is glyphosate kind of a monosalt in the soil, it's also chelating the other minerals that are active in the soil. And so your farmers have forgotten how to add complex systems of compost and soil rotation and soil rest and all these things perhaps. But the fact is, without that active metabolic life force, these farm fields are now producing crops that are inherently weak and vulnerable, and really calling in help from the microbiome. So they get weeds, they get insects, everything else to try to really finish the death cycle so it can rebirth itself. And so when we see really invasive disease, it's not the disease attacking healthy systems, it's a failing system calling in help to regenerate. And when all else fails on the regeneration front, death is the appropriate path. And so we need a full death cycle of a crop sometimes to get that biomass back into the soil to reactivate the soil for the next year. And so a quote unquote failed crop in a year of drought or other insects or whatever happens, that's not a failed crop. That's a crop that Mother Earth is calling back to herself to replenish her nutrient load. And so we've got to stop looking at everything as failure. I feel the same thing with my body. In those occasions where I suddenly develop fatigue and fever and malaise, I can't open my eyes, I'm so weak I can't get out of bed. That's not a sickness that's trying to kill me. That's my body resetting deep chronic misalignment with mineral deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, water deficiency, and so my body is forcing me to shut down a mind and body that's always kind of in perpetual motion because society says to be, and it's tuned out all of my inherent capacity to sense what I need for my own health until I've driven myself into the ground, and then I get sick. And then I say, well, it's the sickness's fault, not realizing, no, it was the 2 years before that sickness that I was running myself into the ground without sensing it, that then required my body to do a major reset. And that high fever is a major reset on biology. It helps kill off a ton of cells. Billions of cells can die in a fever of 103, 104. And then it takes a few days or weeks for your body to take all the energy back in to rebirth all the cells that need replacing now. And so it's a big regenerative event, and yet we demonize it and we say, well, that person's sick and poor person, instead of being like, oh my gosh, finally your body's calling for a major realignment. And so I see that on the planetary level, on the individual human health level. We have to stop demonizing biology. It never does the wrong thing. It's always doing the right thing. If it looks sick, it's calling in a new activation. It's causing in a reformation and recreation of the system.
Absolute profound intelligence in our bodies and in nature. Absolutely. And thank you for your work that you're doing with Farmers Footprint, sharing with the farmers around the glyphosate. And then also your beautiful project Biome, reconnecting humans and nature to support the regeneration and rewilding of planet Earth. Thank you too that Oryx Desert Salt is a little part of that. If we can give a small donation monthly based on the sales, as well as that QR code that you can see, and that goes on most of our projects. So really wanting to create awareness of this. So how was Project Biome sparked and ignited, and why do you believe that the southern tip of Africa and South Africa is an important place to initiate Project Biome from?
Project Biome is an understanding on a couple fronts that the last thing that the world needs is another nonprofit in some ways. At the time that we started this, there was about 7 million nonprofits globally. Now, 8 years later, there's 10.5 million nonprofits running globally. And so with tens of million nonprofits running, the question is, what's the efficacy? Why are we needing all these nonprofits? What is their mission? What are they trying to do? And by and large, these nonprofits are coming along to band-aid larger human systems that are dysfunctional. And so when we look at something like 10 million nonprofits, it's not dissimilar from 10 million different pharmaceuticals being used to treat the diseases of a system that's out of alignment with nature. And so the symptom of chronic alignment in populations of good people is the good people then move to try to be the medicine to the disease that's happening. And so what we started to see is it's time for us to maybe step in with a different role. What if we did what I did in medicine and leave the hospital and start understanding the upstream potential for realignment with nature, so we can stop the drugs, stop all the clinics, stop all of this healthcare system, whether it's functional medicine or Chinese medicine, whatever it is. We shouldn't need so much medicine. If we go up and nourish the bodies back into health, they will function well. So both at the human biology level and at this kind of macroeconomic sociologic phenomenon of 10.5 million nonprofits, there's an opportunity for us to move upstream and ask, where's the malalignment that's driving the need for this many nonprofits, inspiring this many nonprofits? And so that's where Project Biome came in, to start to ask those bigger questions of, at the macro level, how are the large systems of health, energy, ecology, information technologies, and beyond malaligned with nature, and therefore driving this exploitive, destructive nature of humans that then require 10.5 million nonprofits to come along to try to palliate this failed condition. By helping these nonprofits that are on the ground doing really necessary work to try to patch up dying systems, to help them reorient their mind to let's go ahead and do the upstream thing. How do we fix things by realigning the industries that are affecting your nature around you that you're trying to solve, rather than trying to be the band-aid? What if you become the prevention for the system? So helping all of us in the nonprofit space reorient to, we got to stop being activists against the industries that are out there that frankly we all created out of our own behaviors. We created Monsanto, we created glyphosate usage, we created pharmaceutical industries out of our misalignment with nature. We outsourced health to lots of other things. We outsourced food production to other places 3,000 miles away so that we could have cheaper food under slave labor conditions in foreign economies. So we've done all of that, kicking the can down the road to the point now that we're falling off the cliff. We're in a great extinction event. We've lost 50% of biology on Earth over just the last 40, 45 years. We're deep into the sixth extinction now. Humans are now in a negative birth rate, meaning that we're heading for our own extinction on nearly every continent of the world. The only ones left with a positive birth rate are pretty much India and Central Africa. And so we're at this crisis state. So Project Biome is asking all of us, let's start asking how nonprofits pivot from being the activists to being proactively the solution with industry. How do we start partnering with across the nonprofits that are on the ground, informed by people and ecologies locally, to show the crisis that we're in back to industries, and then partner with them to find the solutions that solve for the problems that are happening downstream. And so really we need bridge building rather than the old-fashioned activism of accusing other companies or accusing systems of creating the problem. We all are the problem. We're all one universal species called human, and we are collectively acting in this disconnected, malaligned social system, economic system, etc. And so Project Biome is excited because just changing the mentality of everybody from industry to nonprofits to, look, we all have the solutions right in front of us. We actually know how biology works. We know how human systems work. We can align those two things and we can create a radically different world to live in. And so it's been a fun go. We've got something called the Constellation. And so if you have your own company or your own nonprofit, we would love for you to lean in and check out Project Biome as a kind of a B2B action of how do you find out how you fit into this greater business to business relationship between nonprofits and industry to government back to nonprofits. How do we get that triangle to start to more effectively communicate and problem solve in new ways by coming to terms with the crisis we've all created and innovating in the spaces that would redefine the way in which these industries align with nature.
Yeah, one of the product projects you have constellated is the beautiful 10 Trees project up sort of near Bushbuck Ridge, where the women were trained in permaculture. They were trained in self-defense, which is incredible because it was a community that wasn't safe. And I love the fact that they planted sort of well-established trees and then grafted all of the food, the different foods onto them. And after just 1 year, now there's an abundance of food, and how that would have so incredibly changed the community. I think one thing I'd love to brainstorm with the team is another word for nonprofit. So actually pre-Oryx Desert Salt, I had a project where we workshopped 30,000 children around the country, and Bushbuck Ridge was one of the schools we went to. I traveled with a trailer with 1,000 drums and a beautiful team from Soweto Township up in near Johannesburg. And the nonprofit, you can't actually be sustainable if you're a non-profit. So somehow it kind of buys into a little bit of scarcity consciousness, because I found myself then, it was a beautiful project. We'd have 500 kids and then we'd get them into a heart coherent state, and it's called Transformation Through Celebration. And I just think if we constellate a new word that is not non-profit and scarcity, because then one's always needing something or needing funds. Anyway, just an idea for another time with the team.
Love that. Yeah, I think one thing that we can say about Bushback Ridge is it's a wonderful place to begin for many reasons, including that it's basically the cradle of life. And so the cradle of life and the cradle of humanity are two named locations within South Africa. You had asked earlier why South Africa the focus. It's because it's been the origin of life since the beginning of life. And so there's something interestingly generative about the African continent that has remained in place for 4 billion years that we can witness in the fossil record. So as soon as life could occur on Earth, it occurred up this single corridor from the east coast of South Africa all the way up through the Ethiopian Rift Valley, through Cairo, Egypt, Eastern Europe, all the way up into Scandinavia. That line has been recognized as being the source of life and the most important location in the world to support energetically for the rebirth cycles of the planet. And so along that corridor, you find all of the critical stone architectures and the rest, from the big stone circles that are down in South Africa. There's thousands of these that were placed by indigenous wisdom or perhaps even other races, but there was an intense amount of intelligence that was going into the design of these energetic locations where the stones were being oriented in a way to maximize the portals or the information energetics of a continent. If you follow that corridor up, there's obviously the giant pyramids on that axis in Cairo, Egypt. Go further up into Eastern Europe, you find like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. All of these things are lining up to some original birth canal source for the planet. So it's important for us to acknowledge that in our plans for coming into alignment with the natural regenerative cycle of the Earth, if we're going to be part of the solution. Our government agencies, such as the UN, have done things like plant 8,000 kilometer line of trees along the southern Sahara Desert to try to stop its progression south, without asking the question of why is the desert turning to desert? And the answer is, well, it does that naturally every 20,000 years. You can't stop it. So how do you become part of its solution is to understand what turns it from desert back to grasslands again, as it does on that frequent basis. And so Project Biome is really studying that aspect of the continent and the world at large to with excitement, say, wow, the Earth really is already preparing for the rebirth of the African continent. The grasslands of Sahara will return. It could take a couple thousand years, it could take a couple hundred years, or it could take 10 years, depending on our alignment with these natural recovery plans and actions that the planet is currently taking. We're seeing the big shift in the water table in Africa right now, with many new lakes appearing in northern Africa. What the Sahara Desert right now is turning back into lake countries slowly but surely here. And a lot of them appeared just overnight in September of 2024, just 8 months ago or so. So it's a really remarkable thing that nature goes through these cycles, knows how to rebirth the continent, but our current behaviors, straight lines of trees, monoculture trees, monocrops under chemical agriculture throughout Central and other parts of Africa, we're basically poisoning and disrupting the recovery system of the planet. And so we're going to slow down the process rather than accelerate the process with our current behaviors. But we're recognizing in Project Biome of a simple 3R vision: rewilding the rivers and coastlines with indigenous species, including indigenous human cultures, that were in balance with those species diversities for tens of thousands of years, coupled with regenerative agriculture corridors to produce food and eliminate starvation and hunger, on the continent and frankly globally, by going back to a bioregional food system that existed for all of human history, and then finally reconnecting economies to bioregional resources. And so rewilding, regenerative ag, and reconnected economy are kind of our threefold vision of how do we get everybody to come to a solid cohesive vision. And we believe that 10.5 million nonprofits can find home within those three, and oftentimes in an overlap of two of those or three of those. And so it's exciting that we already have, an easy matrix for the constellation to plug into. And by that, we can improve governance metrics and access to capital for these small orgs as they become part of a greater whole. And for that, we can make them much more effective, moving them from kind of the competitive scarcity model that drives nonprofits globally to more an abundance model, understanding that together as 10.5 million nonprofits, we could finally achieve what we've aimed to, which is change the way that human systems plug into nature. And that could actually advent an era where our inhumanity goes extinct, and we find that we actually have a new humanity emerging through this cooperative relationship to nature rather than an activist approach, pouring all of our energy and being anti-industry or anti-product or anti-whatever. So we got to stop being antibiotic, anti-industry. We need to start being proactive in the way in which we're interacting with one another, building these constellations of beings across industry, nonprofits, and government, with an understanding of how rewilding, regeneration, and reconnected economies can simply reorient, realign the great industry, the great energy systems of humanity with a nature that's already preparing for her rebirth. And that way we might be able to stay and play rather than march ourselves into our own extinction here, as we're currently on target to do. So there's lots of hope despite the radical crisis we put ourselves in. And it's been a joy to see how industry can jump in. And Oryx Salt has been a great example of that. You guys have been very generous in putting on the Project Biome QR code onto your packaging. Oryx Salt, you need to take a few minutes to just give the audience an understanding of what makes the salt so much different than a Himalayan sea salt or Himalayan land salt or a Celtic sea salt. And understand that. But as a product, you guys recognized its relationship back to complex natures, and a mineral salt in and of itself is not going to save humanity, but a mineral salt that's plugging itself back into complex regenerative economies suddenly does become part of that solution. And so give us a sense of what Oryx is, and then give us a sense of how partnering with Project Biome has shifted the vision of your company.
Thank you. So I love this beautiful, I see this infinity loop where we take this beautiful mineral rich salt from Africa, from the southern Africa to America, and then funds flow back into some of these projects. So Oryx comes from this very beautiful place, the Kalahari Desert. The closest town is 175 miles away, so it's a 2.5-hour drive through sand and beautiful expansive sky. And they discovered a 55 million ton underground salt lake, and it is renewed and sustained. So it's an aquifer by 3 subterranean rivers. And I love that there's a synergy and a connection with your beautiful Ion project, where they both source from these ancient rocks and ancient soils. And that's where the salt and the minerals and trace elements pick up. There's quite a phenomenon, though, that this brine water, this underground lake, when we pour it up onto the pan, it is oversaturated. So in the salt industry, sea salt is 13 to 20% saturation. So it takes much longer, a year or longer, in order to saturate and start crystallizing. Whereas because our source and the brine is oversaturated, in summer at 45 degrees Celsius or 120 degrees Fahrenheit, the salt crystallizes in only 4 weeks. So that's one lunar cycle under the hot African sun, the desert wind, and the stars. And I had a really incredible experience a couple of years ago when I went up to do a documentary. We were there for only 48 hours. And on the second afternoon, we were gifted an incredible Kalahari thunderstorm, which is quite a rare event. So it felt like, a gift from the gods. And we watched this wall of water come towards us. For 20 minutes, there was just this deluge of water. And then it passed. And then there was the most incredible, sublime colors in the sky. And then I looked over to where the salt pans were. They were behind some sand dunes, but they were double rainbows. And I suddenly realized how incredibly elemental Oryx Desert Salt is. It's And I'm sure you'd know, but maybe some of the listeners don't know about Dr. Masiru Immortal and his work, where he would take water and put intention in words, and then he would crystallize it and freeze it. And all the beautiful positive words have this incredible structured, almost like a snowflake, whereas the negative words, had no form. So his message to the world was, our thoughts are changing the crystalline structure of our bodies. And so I realized how, water has, and all salt has moisture, unless like table salt, it's been heated, but Oryx Desert Salt has a small percentage of water, which has memory, and it imprints from what's around us. And I'd actually love to show you. I did, and there's a beautiful woman in New Zealand, I'm sure you know her, Zach, Veda Austin, and she's been having conversations with water for the last 10 years. And so I'd seen some of her work, and I was very excited. And when I think about Oryx, I think about this full moon and the salt lying under that, and just absorbing the beautiful energy from that. So of course I went and did some experiments, and let me see if I can show. Struggling to find it. Let's find. There we go. Oh dear. Suzanne. Oh, there we go. So I took one crystal, a 2 millimeter crystal, and put it into a glass petri dish, and then I froze it. And you can see the one on the left is the salt. After it took a bit longer to freeze, because salt water freezes at a lower temperature. But isn't that an incredible synergy between the salt water and the moon? And so I got very excited, and obviously wanted to do another experiment. So just to share where this beautiful iconic, so here's the Oryx Desert Salt logo. And many years ago, I did a 7-day walk through the Namib Desert, and I had close encounters with these beautiful, majestic creatures. So I chose, and this masked face came to mind when I wanted to choose a logo. So I then put a petri dish onto the refill box, and ended up getting the face of the oryx, which was quite incredible. And then there was one more experiment a friend did, and I'm not sure if you can see the two oryx in there. There's the head and the nose sort of resting on the back of this other one, with other oryx, which is in motion. So it's from a place that is untouched, it's unpolluted, it's humans haven't polluted this area. It's actually uninhabitable. The lodge that I stay at, they truck in their water 175 miles. So just to show, so this is Dr. Masiru Immortal's work, the beautiful crystalline structure of the positive words. And then this is, I'm not sure if you've seen this before, this is the ancient alchemical symbol for salt. And for me, it depicts perfect balance. And we know, as you mentioned, Ayurveda, there's so much wisdom from the ancients and from the Vedas that fortunately now in this time are sort of coming to the forefront and becoming more accessible. So with this beautiful alchemical symbol creating balance, we created our logo. And just to show the audience, so this is the Kalahari Desert, and that desert is 1.5 times the size of Texas, to give you a sense of scale. So it really is remote and beautiful, and comes out of under the ground. And those so our pepper comes from small scale farmers in Madagascar, and everything that we do is about giving back and making a difference, like that infinity loop. And there's a percentage of sales that go to the first people in the Kalahari, and as well as Project Biome. And these products are available in Whole Foods, So for the audience who've resonated with the salt, we would love your support. We are also competing against other brands who have been on the shelf for 50 years. And we're spearheading and trailblazing a new category. We are also trailblazing a grinder head, which has a ceramic mechanism. And so you don't grind plastic into your food. And you only buy one grinder, and then you buy the refill. You keep buying the refill box. So last year we saved 817,000 bottles and heads from landfill. So it's a cost saver. It's saving the planet. You're getting this beautiful, almost a homeopathic dose of the Kalahari Desert on your food every day when you choose to put the salt in your food. So yeah, your support will be well appreciated. This is my beautiful team. We went at the end of last year to a drumming experience. We love dancing. So there are a couple of videos on YouTube and on our website. And the team have always got music on. We dance a lot. So there's lots of happy vibes in the salt. So yes. So thank you for that opportunity to share where this beautiful salt comes from and what makes it different. So Zach, you shared something quite a few years ago that really sort of planted a seed, and it was essentially that you told me, not me, or you told the audience that table salt is the most dumbed down version of salt, and so it kind of planted a seed of. So that table salt came about before the Industrial Revolution. So we need salt in order for our brain function. But they didn't want people to be switched on and activated and thinking. And then there was a movement towards sea salt because of the minerals. And then the Himalayan salt is a fascinating, for me, a phenomenon that it went so global pre-internet. The color, the beautiful pink, certainly made a difference because all of us ladies loved it, and it was mineral rich. But what do you think of how the quality of our salt could be shifting and increasing sort of consciousness? Because we've come from this table salt, and it's almost like this elevation, and now we have and there are some other beautiful salts that are also mineral rich and vibrant and alive. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we tend to think of consciousness maybe being the result of like a human brain or something like this, but it's systems across the universe work consciously in the sense that consciousness is not the source of information. Consciousness is your capacity to access information. The information is held within the matrix of water in biology. And so water is the hard drive by which all information is stored. It's stored in our tissues. And we've now been able to demonstrate the neurology of a human brain doesn't have a hard drive. We don't remember things long-term up in the brain. We remember it in the complex water systems that are held within cellular systems throughout the body, including things like the myofascia and other organ systems. And so there's a water source for information, and then at the universal level or the multiverse level, where you're in these extreme scales of information streams, you're utilizing black holes. And so the web of black holes across the universe are a hard drive. Any source of biology on a planet is going to store the short-term information of the planet and the water structure, and the two will interplay all the time between the electromagnetic field and water. And so the amount of electromagnetic field in an environment is going to determine how much life force, life potential it has. So a place like Earth has to concentrate sunlight 1,000-fold to get bacteria, maybe 10,000-fold before you're up at enough energy to create enough particle, to create enough interaction between those particles before you end up with something like a human body. So it's a massive concentration of light energy to get life to occur. And to maintain life, you need that constant updating, constant recharge of that electrical magnetic field that we would call light energy. And so we are light beings manifest in particle state because of the concentration of light. Life is concentration of light energy. The consciousness that life will play in will be determined by how much of the information can be accessed from the multiverse or from the water around it. And that is again determined by the amount of light per cubic centimeter. So the brighter light force is, the more it can access, the more information it can access. And so when you go into meditation, you're shutting down lots of body systems, you're shutting down that busy mind, you're putting your body into a state of rest, you're putting all of your available energy into accessing the hard drive. And so you're bringing yourself into this thing. And in meditation, you're listening to the universe, you're listening to God, if you will. That listening state is a low metabolic state demand for the body that leads to these high energetic experiences of information resourcing or remembrance. So any indigenous culture trained their children to go into these listening things, whether it be around a campfire at night, telling story with the elders speaking, or song, dance, chant, all kinds of different mechanisms to get our bodies accessing information and remembering itself in context and sovereignty within a complex universe. So consciousness requires this high concentration of light, and salt is going to help determine how much of that light energy gets into the system. And so high complex mineral salts are going to support that high electrical charge transiting across biologic systems of water. Therefore, you're accessing more memory. As you get mineral deficient, you end up with less access to the information stream, and you become very vulnerable to being taken over by some sort of external source of information. So this is where your social media feed or the local news suddenly becomes your reality. And so you become very vulnerable to being tricked or living in false realities when you are mineral deficient, therefore light deficient, therefore having a hard time accessing the information of the water within you. And so you're becoming disconnected to the information stream, and therefore your apparent access to consciousness is dialing down. You reinvigorate that system, you create biodiversity, interconnected energy sources, interconnected light, support that with complex mineral systems, and now you've got high electrical charge flowing through the whole system, much easier to access the information field within your water or within the cosmos.
Talking about this overwhelm of social media and it's sort of consuming our attention. There was something I heard from Michael Beckwith many years ago, is we're not suffering from ADHD, but we're suffering from IDHD, intention deficit disorder. And the beautiful thing that you and Charles Eisenstein speak about is the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And when you were speaking about Project Biome and this bringing this, I know from that NPO world, the people who give themselves in service to the projects that they're so absolutely passionate about, is this, and it just gave me this vision, and I think something that we can lean more into is dreaming and imagination. And putting that social media aside and just really allowing ourselves to expand into how beautiful we can create this world, because we are magnificent and this planet is, and we have the potential to dream it into existence.
I think ultimately when we take the opportunity to reconnect to nature in silence, in that listening phase within our own bodies and within the nature we live within, wisdom is an inevitable result. We're going to tap into these wisdom lines. We call it indigenous wisdom, but it's easy to romanticize that and once more divorce ourselves from that phenomenon of wisdom within nature. Indigenous wisdom, I think, is simply a description of human biology put into the context of nature, and this wisdom is going to break forth as you connect the information stream that's available to everybody. And so much of indigenous wisdom, as well as all of our religious texts, are always saying, stop talking, stop moving, listen, orient to the context of a sovereign being here on purpose, receive the information from the field, and you will have your own North Star. You don't have to stop listening to other people's definitions and metrics for value or metrics for success or failure, and start understanding that inherent quality within yourself that not only knows your path to health, also knows your path to purpose.
Connecting back to our souls in nature. Absolutely. Thank you for all of your wisdom and your knowledge and sharing. So we thought to give the audience, have a few questions from the audience. So I think we have a wonderful team at the back. Thank you, Suzanne and Holly and Nina and the team who've helped pull this together. So yes, so we're doing if you take a shelfie with just buying some product, and if you feel generous, please get your family and your besties and your colleagues switched onto good quality salt. Send us a slip, and we're going to do a pick out of the not quite a hat, and give a year's supply of Oryx salt. We'll send you a very beautiful hamper from South Africa. And if the team can put up 1 or 2 questions for us. We have a pop into the comments section. And thank you everyone for your time and for coming on and listening and spending your Thursday evening in Africa. So I think it's morning still in America. Good morning.
There's a couple of people asking about the existence of heavy metals inside of mineral salts. Do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So taking an analysis of salt is like taking a blood test. It's going to be different today to this morning as it would be tomorrow and another day. So we do have an analysis. If anyone is interested, we're very happy to send it through to you. And we have more samples going out to the lab. But the analysis changes season to season, batch to batch. So it really is just a point in time. So just to be aware of that. My sense, like this beautiful Ion Project product, is that it comes from deep under the earth that is far from humans. We haven't added anything into these regions. As with the oceans, sadly, we haven't taken care of our oceans. There's the whole story around microplastics and pesticide and fertilizer runoff. So I really do trust in nature and trust that the salt that comes from deep in the earth is in the perfect balance that the body can recognize and utilize.
Very good. Yeah. I think what we see with all these mineral salts is that the whole periodic chart is supposed to be available to biology. We've demonized some parts of the periodic chart, and we've herified other versions of or elements within that, those 90 plus elements. But the fact is that, as you're indicating there, nature's constantly informing the water and the microbiome on how to utilize the entire chart for its good. We know that the heavy elements need to exist in these trace features to create health as well. And so it's easy to get concerned about, lead or, too much iron in something or whatever it may be. But the fact is that in trace element form, these things are critical to the movement of nutrients, the movement of electricity, the movement of water through systems. And so I like that answer. I think, again, it's important to make sure that we're not, being contaminated by outsourced sources. But that is the unique feature of Oryx, is you're coming from a space that hasn't been touched by our rain ultimately, because our rainwater is inherently contaminated with a lot of the chemicals that we're concerned about, glyphosate and the rest. And so to be an underground aquifer, protected away from these human systems is a unique opportunity to reduce the amount of toxicity carried in water and mineral salt environments. Himalayan salt is asked about here. Do you want to answer, how Oryx differs from Himalayan salt?
Sure. So Himalayan, I mean, I thank you, Himalayan, for creating this global awareness and almost the gourmet category of salt. It doesn't come from the Himalayas. It actually comes from Pakistan, but pink Pakistani salt doesn't have the same exotic ringtone. And unfortunately now, because of the global demand, it is dynamited out. So some of it potentially has some chemical residue. It is unfortunately not from a renewable resource as well. So whether it's 50 years or 150 years or 500, at some point there will be a gaping hole in the earth, and it won't be there for 7 generations. Um, so that's and unfortunately the communities are also getting paid $4 per ton, which is actually slave labor. So yeah, that's Himalayan.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so I think one of our take homes here is that the other difference that can be out there is the number of minerals within the salts. And so Himalayan salt is so much superior to table salt. Table salt's sodium and chloride only. Himalayan, you're at about 23 different minerals reflected in that rather than 2. When you're at a sea salt, such as Celtic sea salt, which is mentioned in the question here, you're at 64 minerals. And so you are representing like 2/3 of the periodic chart at that point, which is exciting. So I'm a huge fan of the complex sea salts. The collection of sea salt is increasingly challenging, again, because of the toxicity of our oceans right now. So the amount of chemical runoff and microplastics in our ocean water is increasingly challenging to get a clean source. But I don't need to stress anybody else out on that. It's more just an observation that because of the way in which human history and human behavior is so undermining the health of our ecosystems, it is necessitating further and further stretch for us to find the resources to support biology today. So something like Oryx salt, or perhaps even more extreme example of effort, is the 50 million year old soils that we're going after for the intelligence of nature and the ion gut support product that you mentioned. These are heroic efforts to try to bring nature back to humanity that has so far divorced itself from it. So my hope through Farmers Footprint Project Biome is that we start to reorient all of our human systems back to a place where we no longer have to supplement nature and it becomes inherent in our daily experiences again. The Kalahari and the Oryx salt is an example of a band-aid on a gaping wound that we have globally of mineral deficiency. And so we see this as a temporary solution for humanity that once again needs to be producing its own bioregional salts in every country, as you had mentioned earlier. And so it's less about demonizing any salt and more about a recognition of, wow, like you said, Himalayan salt is not a regenerative source for us. We're going to need to start to understand the cycles of water and salt on the planet again, and really start to appreciate the periodic chart in all of its different forms that do vary season to season, do vary by bioregion to bioregion. The salts that are inherent around the equator are going to be a lot better resource for people that live at the equator. Salts further away from the equator are likely to contribute the minerals that are more necessary for any biology, be it an animal or a human living in those environments. And so bioregional salt will be a future that we live towards. But in the short run, I think we're trying to find the best sources we can for complex mineral combinations. And so it wouldn't be a bad idea to use Oryx on some days, Celtic on another, Himalayan on another. Really, varying up your salt sources is probably a good idea, and sensing into your body between the three would be a very interesting journey for you if you compare those head to head in your own body. Do a week of Oryx, do a week of Himalayan, do a week of Celtic, compare and contrast the results in your own biology, and sense into which ones under what conditions are going to be the best one can do.
Yeah, that would be a cool experiment to do.
There's a question here on the ion products. Ion products are available in about 120 countries around the world through a number of online distributors. If you're not in the United States, then iHerb is the one that gets the farthest reach. We have the hardest time getting into South Africa, ironically, and all of the other Commonwealth countries that came out of London there. So Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa I'm sorry that your governments continue to try to block complex nutrient resources for you, but it's been a 14-year journey into trying to get those governments to comply with a different vision on human health, and that hasn't come to fruition yet, but we're working on that every year. So we hope to distribute in your localities easier, but for most of the countries of the world, iHerb can get it to you. Cheapest way to get it in the United States is definitely through the intelligenceofnature.com website. But a lot of your other suppliers, you can find on shelves around the country. We're in a couple thousand grocery stores, and we're in a couple thousand medical clinics globally. And a lot of them will give you price breaks as well. So there's an opportunity for you to engage that product for pennies a day to get your health supported for a different future for yourself as you start to understand the relationship between the microbiome, water, and the minerals. And that's how the dance of life happens. And these two products of Oryx and Ion play really nicely together. And so it'd be really lovely to see what your biology does over a few months of integrating these resources of nature back into your daily lives to tap into a deeper sense of vitality, increasing that water, increasing the electromagnetic field within the body to tap into that knowledge field that we call the universe, and finding that vibration within your liquid crystals of the human cell as your receptor for that intelligence and wisdom, and frankly, the creativity to flow back through. I hope to see you guys in a much more creative and vital force within the years to come.
Thank you. Beautiful. And it's actually such a simple solution. It's not complicated. Thank you for the joy and for everything that you're doing, Zach. I'm really looking forward to seeing you back in South Africa in July and just planting a seed to everyone from around the world. South Africa and Africa is a very special place. It's very primal. It's very spirited. And if you're looking for anywhere for time out, I highly recommend coming for a visit. April, May is a really beautiful time to come. And I'll see you in a few weeks or in a month or so, Zach.
Looking forward to being back in that beautiful country of yours.
Absolutely. Thank you. Travel safely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening.